Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining live today. Before we start, just a few words about the format. All my LinkedIn Live sessions are my private independent project. I do it purely out of curiosity and passion for the discussions I am having with my guest speakers. If you have comments, questions, or your own take on anything we discuss, please just post them into the comment section. I am here today with someone I've been looking forward to talking for a long time. John Townley is a pioneer astrologer, a musician, a journalist, and a maritime historian. He's the father of the composite chart, which he introduced back in 1973. And for decades, his work has been out and about something unusual in this field, looking for a physical basis for astrology, one that's consistent with what the biological and environmental sciences are actually discovering. His book includes the composite chart, lunar returns, dynamic astrology, and planets in love. And he has a new one on the way, Cause and Coincidence, with Robert Schmidt digging into Paul Kammerer's 1919 work Das Gesetz der Serie. His approach, he calls it eco-behaviorist, is featured in the ongoing series How Astrology Works for the Astrological Society of Princeton. John, welcome.
Good. Delighted to be here.
Glad to have you here. Before we start, John, you are also a musician and you've got a record out. And you'll be soon in Vienna playing live here.
Yes, I'm
Could,
looking forward to it. On the beginning, end of the first week of August, I'll be in two different clubs.
right. But what I find really, really amazing is that you have learned to play guitar from, the blind American blues and gospel singer,
Yes,
Reverend Gary Davis.
he was my teacher, and eventually I went to become his road manager, and eventually I produced his last album last studio album before he died. And he has been my you know, mentor in music in terms of how you how you think about music, how you construct it on the guitar, because he played the guitar in a way that it sounded like a whole band, because he was reproducing all the parts of the band on the guitar. And no one else really did that, and I'm still doing it and I'm teaching it, and I hope to do a workshop or two on that as well in Vienna, and see what we can set up, because it's stuff that needs to be handed down to future generations, because he's long gone and I'm in my 80s, so it's a matter of time.
It's a legacy that shouldn't get lost. And I hope that we will have a second live session where we will discuss only about music. Because today's topic is actually about astrology.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Well, let's kick it off. So I will kind of provoke you. Let me start where a lot of people start with the objection. Brian Cox, the physicist, has been about as blunt as one can be. On the BBC, he called astrology, and I'm quoting, a load of rubbish. On another occasion, he called it astronomy for the weak minded. I'm personally also a physicist by training myself. And I would like to know your opinion about, what when you hear astrology called a load of rubbish, what part of that do you accept, and what part do you think the skeptics get wrong?
Well, I once made a statement for which I was much reviled myself back in 1986, that 50% of astrologers are charlatans, and another 20% uh, really don't know what they're doing, and only about 10% even know how to do astrology well, because it's a very complex uh, historical tradition that has to be learned over the years. How it's been cast out by both religion and science in the last couple of hundred years. But before that, it had a real connection to life and how people thought about life. It's uh, what we are beginning to see now is that there may be some much more real effects of what the sun, moon, and planets actually do to human beings and to animals. And there's some real effect of what's going on up there in relation to what goes down here. Unfortunately, astrologers themselves have been so disconnected from scientists by their upbringing and by their rejection of the scientific community that they really aren't seeking to find out if there is a physical basis. And of course, debunkers in the scientific community don't bother to look very carefully. So if there was one, they wouldn't find it because they weren't really looking for it. And, but now that the technologies around are developing approaches that are much closer to the way astrologers analyze personality traits and so on, and that I think we're about to be, it's the point where we can begin to hook them up for real in a more in a way that's consistent with science and technology today, which is developing along much different paths than it did 100 years ago when astrologers were considered terrible. Because a good example, just to give you a brief story, I was performing on the deck of a tall ship in New York City, East River, and a beautiful full moon was coming up that night. And one of the people in the audience came up on the ship and said, "Oh, I hear you're an astrologer too." And I said, "Yes." And he said, "Well, you know, none of that has an effect. I have more gravitational effect on you because of the inverse square law, Newton's gravitational law, than the moon does." And of course, literally 1 to 1, he was right. Uh, but he wasn't moving me very much. I wasn't moving him very much. However, as the moon rose, the ship we were sitting on and the two of us together rose a total of 6 feet. And
Mm.
so, well, I guess there is some effect going on there, but it's not a 1 to 1 personal effect. It's an effect on the environment in general, which itself then filters down to the people within the environment. And that's something that they didn't look at things that way 100 years ago or even 50 years ago. The whole environmentalist systems way of thinking uh, is basically going to my generation. And the mathematics that required to analyze it were only discovered or developed in the late 60s and early 70s, when chaos theory was developed and various forms of systems theory and catastrophe theory. There's a lot of them that show how uh, very sophisticated relationships within an environment affect people in ways that they had no idea was happening before.
Mm.
And and it's at those kind of levels we should be looking for any effects of the sun, the moon, the planets, all of which have a great effect on Earth. Earth is Jupiter, for instance, pulls the Earth out of orbit by something 40 to 16,000 kilometers every year. So we're in a constant push-pull with Jupiter and every other planet. If we go around, there's a big planet over there, we push up a little towards it, and then we pull out of orbit, and then we push up towards another one, and vice versa. And all of those affect the way the Earth reverberates itself. And of course, that steps down to the rest of the environment, the electromagnetic environment, the gravitational, and the rhythmic environments. So many different electromagnetic cycles, cycles within the atmosphere and the Earth's crust and the oceans, all of which we're a part of, and all of which we don't notice consciously most of the time because we're too busy doing our individual things during the day. But all of these things are affecting us, just like this guy didn't notice that he was going up 6 feet thanks to the
Right.
moon. We don't notice all the rest of it because it's all going on we don't need to know it. So evolutionarily, we didn't think about knowing it. We physically know it in our bodies, and we're beginning to learn how much our bodies know. Neural systems, what they can pick up. We 50 years ago, just the big discovery that all birds had magnetic cells in their eyes. That maybe that's how they were so good at migrating so precisely. And since that time, there's about 6 different ways we've discovered that birds use not just magnetism, but the refraction of light, and the interaction and
Hmm.
direction of it, as well as the rest of the environment. And now we're discovering just a series of Caltech experiments just recently discovered that it's not just birds. We have it too. In actual brain cells, there are magnetic cells, which, if when they are manipulated, change our memories and change the way we react to questions. So it's just very, it is very thought provoking, and it's the kind of
It is
thing that,
indeed.
yeah, that's the kind of thing that we will, on, if we start to look into this, the stuff that science is doing like that, then astrologers, if they open their minds and learn some of this stuff, would begin to maybe see that there is a physical basis to astrology, but they'll have to go at it in slightly different ways than they did.
Yeah, John, I want to frame this in a way that you like to frame it, top down from system rather than bottom up from symbols, because the way you put it into stuck with me. So you said astrology is just another reflective, highly contextual level of multiple, highly self-similar interconnected systems. Can
Yes.
you unpack that for everyone? I mean, start big and work down.
Well, it's astrology is in the way astrology is originally looked at. It was originally thought to, of course, it was thought that the Earth was the center of the universe, and so everything was very self-centered, as people tend to be. Science is self-centered as well, and we keep forgetting that. We weren't made in God's image, for instance, in religion, we made the religion in our image. It's just like us. So it was assumed that the planets either sent rays down to us and manipulated us, and so on. But that, as science came to prove, well, it turned out to be not the case at all. And we weren't the center of the universe, and there weren't any planetary rays changing us. And what you begin to see, however, is that the planetary influences may not influence us individually, or may not seem to at first, but it very much influences the environment. Our environment is controlled, particularly by the sun and moon, and the rotation of the earth. Those are things that are fundamental in astrology, and these are the things that make life go, and drive evolution. And therefore, what we probably should be looking to is not what's coming down from above to us, but what is enwrapping the earth, and causing changes in it, and because we're part of the overall ecological systems on the earth, it's coming down to us. So in a way, we're not getting uh, influences from the planets down to us. We're getting influences from the planets to Earth and coming up through our feet. So instead of from the sky, it's coming through the ground, and the environment around us. And it's only within the last 50 years has there been the ways of thinking and the mathematics to start actually analyzing that and bringing it down, uh, taking a neural system and finding out how it affects a single spot, which would be an individual or part of an individual or part of an
Hmm.
individual's behavior, which is integrated with the environment. And that's, I think, astrology will become increasingly thought of as one particular sort of behavioral approach to ecological systems theory.
In your work, cycles are more fundamental than meaning. So let me ask you a simple question. What exactly is repeating?
Well, pretty much everything is repeated, day and night, monthly, the tides during the day and night, and the tides as they go monthly, and our growth cycles, everything that repeats is basically a cycle. This studies of cycles per se really began in the late 40s, early 50s with the foundations of solar cycles. And of course, cycles are the thing that people look for most in investing. They hope they can find a repeating thing so they know where the next big chance to make money is. Uh, but cycles themselves tend to interact, and so larger ones will entrain smaller ones. I mean, a good example is the moon. The moon always faces us because the Earth is entrained to have one revolution as it has one rotation as it has one revolution around it, so you never see the other side of it. And it wasn't always that way, but it is now, and that's that. A lot of planets do that to their satellites, but it happens on Earth all the time. The first person that really discovered this was Christian Huygens back several hundred years ago when he discovered that if we put a bunch of pendulum clocks in the same room and they're all swinging back and forth, and he'd come back in the morning and all the pendulums would be in sync. So how did that
Yeah.
happen? Well, it happens because they're all sitting on the shelf, and the shelf puts in vibrations bit by bit, and nudge all the clocks until they get into the same cycles. And that's just from sitting in the same room on the same shelf with the vibrations. But that happens hormonally, for instance, if there was this ancient study, actually, dozens and dozens of years ago, with menstrual cycles. Whoever the woman with the most dominant effect socially in a group, uh, the menstrual cycles of the rest of the women in that group will line up with hers.
Hmm.
And this is, in general, large scale cycles that have a lot of energy and pull in smaller cycles and sync them up. It's very physical in terms of
Yeah.
organs, but it's hormonal, and of course you tune the hormones that are coming out. You're breathing them in, and you're getting the ones that are most dominant. And so you instead of a shelf, what you're getting is something that's through the air, and then you sync right up because suddenly there's a lot of hormones. There's this major person in the room is menstruating suddenly, or and suddenly everybody else soaks in those hormones and they start going with it too. And this is true across the board of waves in the ocean. So this is how you get these monster waves that people didn't even believe there were monster waves 100 years ago. I thought it was a sailor's tale because nobody
Hmm.
could think of how they could happen. And now, well, the first example of actually being documented was in the 50s. A major freighter went down. I think it was Swedish. I'm not sure which. It was from Scandinavia, but it was actually documented what happened, and so people started taking it seriously. And finally, uh, we've got the mathematics to show how waves stack on each other, so that even out of a calm sea, enough waves will stack up, and suddenly this monstrous wave will come and completely overwhelm the ship, sink it right to the bottom. So that's what's happening in the air. Something similar appears to be happening in ground cycles for earthquakes, perhaps volcanoes. And the weather is certainly cyclical and is very much driven by strong forces, strong repeating forces drive the smaller ones entirely.
Mm.
And we had seen that. I mean, like what they call the law of storms back in the Civil War, American Civil War period. which was actually we call it the Coriolis effect now, but it was really invented by the, the head of the weather department of the Confederate States of America. And that's now, we figured that out mathematically and physically in ways that we didn't have the math and we didn't know the physics to understand why any of that would happen. And of course, if you don't understand how it will happen, the first thing you say is, well, it's not happening. We don't believe it. It's that somebody's telling the story. It can't be happening. I don't have a reason for it. And instead, and this is a big help lately, is because the world's so interconnected, all these tales of things that people didn't believe,
Mm.
there enough data is coming in now that we say, oh, well, I guess there's so many reports of it, and so many documents, so much information, we better look more to find out what's really there. And, undoubtedly we'll eventually get a Bigfoot. It took forever. You know, nobody believed in gorillas for years. They say, let's come and say, oh, these big, fat black men with hairy chests on the shores of Africa. And we said, nah, it's nothing like that. Well, it turned out there were gorillas right there on the beach. And it took a while until they finally got there and saw them on a regular basis, and now we believe in gorillas. But we didn't believe in
Mm.
gorillas. We thought they were unscientific. There was no basis for it. It was just a wild tale from somebody. So, and old, you say, oh, dinosaurs still around? Probably not. Boy, they didn't think so until they started running across, until they found a coelacanth, which was basically a dinosaur fish back in the 1930s. And because they had it in hand, there was nothing they could say, oh, we don't believe in it, there it is. It's right there. And now they're catching coelacanths all the time. It's definitely a species that's still around. It's just not a lot of them. And there's an awful lot going on in the ocean that's like that. We'll see more and more because of the kind of data that's around. We'll be able to see patterns that we were not able to see before. And, of course, AI is going to boost that
Yeah.
astronomically. And we will find out whether there are the phenomenon that we were disbelieving in maybe is really real, and we should look a little bit closer to find out why it's happening. And it's a lot of the things in astrology will turn out to be that, I'm sure. But it'll also turn out to be not the way astrologers thought it was, also.
Mm.
What we're
Yeah.
finding out is how it's really happening, not how they decided it was happening 3,000 years ago and have kept up the folklore. It's basically astrology, because astrologers don't have a physical basis. It's one teacher teaching the next, and they get locationals of it, so it's different in China, and it's different in India than it is here. And it's kind of like folk music. Everybody knows the same song, but everybody's got a different version of it.
It's
And
true.
so, and unfortunately, that's not scientific.
No,
Uh,
not at all. And
yeah,
I
because
also, yeah, go on, please.
oh well, but a good example, you hear a familiar tune, and let's see, oh, Freude, schöne Gott, or Funkin'. Oh, isn't that Yankee Doodle went to town? Wait, aren't they the same tune? Oh, well, maybe they're kind of different, but they're kind of the same. And that's the kind of stuff you get in astrology. And of course, once you get the real Beethoven's real score, then you know what it is. But until that,
Mm.
it's just somebody remembering the tune, or maybe misremembering the tune. And that's the way astrology is right now. So astrologers will have to think of things differently, and
Yeah.
perhaps they'll have to think of it more, less as a natal chart pattern that's foisted on you from the moment you're born, and more of a developmental uh, situation. In other words, you get a pattern of whatever's happening in the sky at the moment. And it's really a set of initial conditions. And if you start looking at it from that point of view, you may find that a lot of the rules of astrology traditionally actually fit in very nicely if you look at it that way. In other words, you've got for astrologers, uh, if you look at where all the things are in a circle, I don't know if graphics go in, but
Mm.
if you say you have the sun in one place, and astrologers have something called, they look for a planet, what the planet rising ahead of the sun is that supposed to tell you something about the character? Actually, rising ahead of the sun is actually a planet that hits the horizon first, so you get its influence first, or there's another planet, the moon is passing by, the moon hits that first and then hits the sun. So actually, it's a precursor to whatever's happening with the sun. And therefore, if you have, and the sun in astrology is your ego, it's supposed to be what life force makes you feel good, it's what happens in your birthday, sun comes back there. And so, the sun's a nice happy thing in your experience. And say if you have Saturn ahead of the sun, so everything, before something hits the sun, it hits Saturn first, and Saturn slows things down, limits things. And that's, if every time you have a nice birthday party, just before that, you got thrown in
Happened
jail.
something.
Yeah,
Yes.
if something Saturn happened to you, pretty much you wind up, when something Saturn happens to you, you say, oh, something good's coming up. Must be my birthday coming, right? And that actually becomes a set of expectations. And what are expectations? They are what build character. If you're expecting something and one thing happens, then that's how you behave. That becomes your
Mm.
behavior. It's built on expectations. That's why people are warned about expectations, because they can be very perilous. And if you put a whole chart of 10 or 15 different spots in it, everything as the moon goes around, all of that, each one hits one and then hits the next, and it sort of brings the expectation to the next of whatever happened previously. And thus, as it goes around, you have this whole complex set of expectations which become character. And the longer those go around, those cycles go around, all more cycles,
Yeah.
then the more locked in you become with your expectation, and pretty soon people call that character. So it may
Mm.
be that the natal horoscope is not a fixed stamp spatially. It is
Mm.
actually a temporal development, and the character that develops from it is not something that is innate within the person, but it is learned
Right.
by the person
It's
in a,
it's
in a
developed.
behavior,
Yeah.
in a behaviorist fashion. Now, people, astrologers talk about Freud, or they talk about particularly Jung, and they're trying to have this sort of mystic versions of character. Well, nobody talks about behaviorism. No one's looking at Watson, or Pavlov, but that's the way that seems to work. And then astrologers should start taking that into account. That the time is something that is as important, and the development through time, based on what's in a set of initial conditions, may be the appropriate and correct mathematical and developmental way to look at the horoscope.
Yeah. When I also studied a bit astrology. I'm not calling myself an astrologer, but my conclusion was our ancestors build a kind of database patterns. And when the circumstances repeat statistically, similar events can recur. However, and you said this, and I completely agree, the patterns repeat, the events don't.
Well, Mark Twain was supposedly, like so many other things people think Mark Twain said, that he was supposed to have said that the patterns, the events don't repeat, but the patterns, the
Yeah.
similar patterns occur. And I think everybody pretty much understands that. And again, it's a cycle. You get a set of similar things, you're going to get similar things happening, but they're not going to be quite the same. And they're going to branch off. And every time you make a choice, you branch off somehow into that part of the universe that you wouldn't have met otherwise. It's a road
Hmm.
not taken. You're always making choices, and the universe you'll be in on that road you just took. And there's interesting ways in astrology to actually take advantage of that. One of them, for instance, is the solar return. I guess a major part of my clientele it comes to find out where they should go for their birthday. Now that basically the concept in astrology is that every time the sun comes back to its natal
Position.
exact position, degree minute, something position, a chart is formed which kind of depicts a sort of overlying, not driving, but sort of overlay of events of the coming year. Now, that pattern is going to be there wherever you are, basically where the planets are in relation to each other. But where they are in relation to the horizon depends on where you are at that moment. So if you want a strong chart with the sun rising, for instance, that's a really strong chart. You're going to give you extra energy for the next year.
But
And you want to
John,
be there where the sun's rising on your birthday. So you have to find out.
so this is astrocartography. But how, based on your experience, how does the fact that one can, based on his astrocartography, based on where his or her sun return is more benefic, how did you notice a positive influence? Did you notice a change? I mean, because it's one thing that if this year on my birthday I'm staying at home, but I know that on my solar return it would be best to be in Rio de Janeiro, and I'm not
Right.
there. I'm here. So what is the difference? What would be the
Well,
difference in?
the difference, of course, is where the planets are, whether they're above, which ones are above and which are below the horizon, which ones are rising, and so on. Now, if you believe that the solar return has a meaning to begin with, then presumably it's a chart of an event, and it's going to have a time and place, and therefore one of the major things in any astrological chart is what's rising, the degree of the ascending, and you want any chart, you would want that to be strong.
Mhm.
And you want the sun to be in a strong place, either straight up or down, straight across, not sitting around in the middle somewhere where it's not having a lot of influence. And where you are, according to your birthday, uh, some places will have the sun rising and some won't. And some will have the moon rising and some won't. It's the same really overall relationship with where the diurnal position is, depends on where you are on Earth. Now, you're taking, as an astrologer, you're taking by faith that the solar return means anything at all. Uh, but assuming you do, then you're going to have to figure, well, here's a technique to actually go and make it better, which most things in astrology you can't do. You can't affect what the planets are doing.
Mm.
But here you can. You can affect whether you're getting the sun rising or whether you're getting the moon rising and so on and so forth. But assuming none of that has any meaning at all, this is going back to the quote, uh, taken, not taken, started with an axe to the thread here. And that is that when you make that kind of uh, decision for yourself to go to Rio de Janeiro, never been there,
Mm.
uh, then A, you're making a statement about yourself, a positive statement about yourself. I'm going to make things better. That's an amazing move just by itself. You could go anywhere saying, I'm going to make things better, and it will probably make things better. On top of that, uh, that whichever that road taken or not taken is, when you travel for a birthday, you'll find things coming back at you simply because you took that road. A good example is the astrologer I originally learned from sent me in the late 60s, early 70s to various places for solar return. It was supposed to be the best place in the world. In fact, I wasn't at Woodstock. Uh, because my birthday's right when Woodstock was, because he said, oh, you have to be down in Veracruz, Mexico. Well, it was a great experience. I got stranded there, but I had a really good time and actually wrote a song about it. But what's really interesting is like the one after that, he sent me to St. John's, Newfoundland. Now, just a geography, if you're trying to adjust the ascendant, or if you're trying to adjust the planetary, there's a whole space that maybe you want it to be later and later during the day. So you want to go east. Well,
Mm.
you can't get any farther east and still be on the North American continent in St. John's, Newfoundland. So I frequently find myself sending people there because I'm trying to get them as close as possible to the east. And from there on, it's the Atlantic Ocean, next stop Iceland, which is, I often send people to as well because that's a convenient spot, or can be astronomically. And so I went to St. John's Newfoundland. Well, I didn't know anybody there. Beautiful place. The place was at the time, very lonely, and I didn't know anybody, but I hung around. I got familiar with the place. I'd never heard of the place before. It's a beautiful harbor. Has very, very steep walls entering the harbor. So it's a very safe harbor. It was
Mm-hmm.
used as a major submarine base during World War II because it was so safe. And it's got magic acoustics. If you stand at the top of the cliffs, you can hear people, what they're talking in the boat below, hundreds of feet away. It's kind of like the theater of Epidaurus. And there's magic acoustic value to it. And the people are very friendly, and they drink a lot, and that's good, and they have a lot of great music. But I just sort of left it at that. And, it was interesting, and did the year come out the way I hoped it? I guess it did, and it didn't. But I was definitely really happy that I went because it was an interesting adventure. But 20 years later, I was on the Polish tall ship that was Elisa Charney, going in the tall ship races during the summer of 1992. And we were, I had already got my officer wings, as it were, because I happened to have, I enrolled or was brought to, I'm invited to come to teach music and music history. But I had the first Apple laptop and an Apple printer with me,
Oh, okay.
and it turned out, and I just hung them above my bunk. It was fantastic. So I had my own little office, and it was, I mean, the highest tech thing on the Lisa John otherwise was the captain's IBM Ball typewriter, and that was it. And as we were sailing into Boston, I typed up this whole big promotional sheet with pictures and everything else for the Lisa Charney and handed it to the captain, and he thought it would just come out of the sky. What is this? So I suddenly got appointed. I was suddenly, from merely a teacher and a crew member, I was appointed liaison officer, and now I was suddenly an officer and a gentleman instead of just a swabby. But as we sailed out of Boston, it was great fun. Lisa Charney had a lot of performers on it. Students who perform music and dance and Polish traditional, so fantastic ship. And we got to we went to Halifax actually. And when we came out of Halifax, it was supposed, from that point on, everybody was supposed to be racing across, under sail across to England. And at that point, we had a problem with some of the navigation, and we had to turn on the engine, at which point we were disqualified. We could not be racing because we were restricted under sail. So we had to do something. The captain had to do something. And what are we going to do with this crew now? Out of Halifax. And I said, well,
So,
I mean, the next stop was supposed to be Ireland, and that's a long way away. And people would like something more to do. And there's a lot of beautiful stuff to see at sea, like sea animals and so on. And I said, why don't we go? There's a great harbor up in St. John's, Newfoundland. I bet we could go there, and after this year, there's a lot of icebergs going far south. We might stop in an iceberg, and that would be educational and fun. And he said, okay, make it so. Get on the ship to shore. I I got on the ship to shore, got in touch with the harbor people, and nobody had been to. He'd never been to St. John's, Newfoundland. He didn't even
Okay.
really know
Yeah.
about it. So I got on the horn to the St. John's Harbor people and to the CBC, so we'd have cameras and television as we rolled in, and we rolled in with red carpets and cameras on the cliffs, and it was fantastic. And we did
It's amazing.
3 days of giving concerts and partying, and they gave us all kinds of supplies, which we were short of. It was an absolutely magical thing. And none of that would have happened if I hadn't taken myself return to St. John's, Newfoundland 20 years before. So that's the kind of stuff that happens when you make those choices. And
Mm.
some of what's in astrology is about making those choices, which
Yeah.
by itself makes it useful.
Yeah, because I think that the natal chart shows actually one's potential, and what one is doing with that potential depends on what he or she, on what decisions they are taking.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you
Your
you
decisions.
yeah, you use three layers: macro, meso, and micro. Can you define them in plain, I mean operational terms, so people can picture it?
Okay, well, let me just finish with the making the choices, because unfortunately a lot of people look to not only it's what your choices are and what you decide, it's also what your environment hems you in with, what provides for you. In other words, people see Jupiter coming and they go, oh, it's going to be great, I'm going to go, or Saturn coming and oh, I'm going to be held back. But in some cases, the opposite happens. Jupiter comes and have a heart attack because Jupiter makes you too excited. And depends on the environment. I remember getting letters from this black kid in prison in Florida, who was in prison for having basically with a maximum, with a required sentence of 14 years. And he was studying astrology, and he said, well, got Jupiter coming, do you think they're going to let me out? And I had to say, no, there's something Jupiter will happen within the prison, but it won't be you getting out, because you got to be there for 14 years, and they're not going to stop that. And that's the kind of thing we forget about. We forget that the environment itself, the same patterns will happen within differently within a given set of environments, which now brings me back to scale. And one of the things that is fascinating, both in astrology and in life in general, is how things separate into size. We think of bugs living in a very small, they don't live very long, they live very fast, and they have a very limited universe, and that's a real small scale. And then we have bigger scales where the animals or humans live, and we have even bigger scales, which is what's happening astronomically. That's your macro scale. The meso scale is sort of where we live. And these are arbitrary names. You just step them up. And if you when you get very small, you get on the atomic scale, that's a nanoscale. So things happen within limits in an environment, which tend to, and those tend to separate. A good example is in sound, or in the sound as we hear it. Because sound is just sound. It happens by itself. When the tree falls in the forest, it makes the noise, whether you hear it or not. And depending on who you are, whether you're a human or a bat, you'll hear a different thing. Inside,
Correct.
you interpret
Yeah.
it differently, but it's the same thing coming at you. Now, if you hear a noise just going, 1, 2, 3, 4, that's rhythm. That's what we consider to be rhythm. Not music, not tone, it's rhythm. And if you go and just in a very slow moment, that doesn't seem to be a rhythm to us. That seems to be, it's happening so slow, it doesn't seem to be connected. So what we're seeing in scale is what we see as events that are connected. So as you go, now you're in a rhythm, and they get faster. And here's you, that's on Dante, you're just strolling along, enjoying the sunshine afternoon, and then things are getting more exciting. And there's a march of rave coming, and everybody's moving faster, and pretty soon they're going real fast like that. And that's like prestissimo, and that's 300 beats a minute. And pretty soon, that's no longer rhythm, it just becomes a buzz. It's not music, it's not rhythm, and you hear just a lot of cranky noise. But you get fast enough, and you keep those beats happening fast enough, and suddenly it becomes a low sound. And as that picks up, the lowest you can start to hear it is at about 20,000 for a person for really good. Elephants are down at 10, or almost to one side of the second. But we can have it here at 20 to 40. And that's deep bass. And then as it goes up, and goes up, it starts to become musical tones. And so you hit low C, middle C, high C, and it starts to go up until it becomes a screech and disappears. And we can't hear it, bats can hear it, but we can't hear it anymore. That's our physical limitations, and that defines that scale. So we have a scale of rhythm. It's the same, just repeating clicks. But we hear one scale down here, a rhythm, turns into another scale of musical tones, of which we hear about 8 octaves. And then on to, in terms of sound, we don't hear it anymore. However, we do also, the other set of things that information comes into us is light. We don't hear that whole set of microwaves, microwave radiation, electromagnetic radiation, up until we hit light. All the stuff that's radio frequencies, basically, what we've discovered to use, but nobody used them at all, or maybe creatures that we don't know that talk radio to each other. But maybe we're interfering with them with broadcasting radio. But we and most animals don't start seeing electromagnetic radiation till you hit light. And there, it's a very low infrared to the high ultraviolet. It's just about 1 octave, and that's all you see. And those sound and light are basically what you hear. But on each scale, emotionally, you have the same reaction. Something that's low, slow beat, a little bit mournful, and maybe it's a little bit dangerous. Good. Let's get up going like that, and pretty soon it's a nice happy dance.
It's more joyful.
Yeah, it's more joyful. You go to music, get a low tone, it's kind of threatening, bass, bassoon, kettle drums, but you get up until you're in the piccolo, and it's a happy, laughing and so on. So the low frequencies are troublesome, and the high frequencies are enjoyable, and you get the light. It's the same thing. The infrared and low red to dark red, they're threatening. That's what that's where the devil is, right? And you get up until you get to the light blues and beautiful violets, and that's what the angels are wearing. And that's how we see proportionate events or proportionate frequencies within a scale, within a scale. Now, if you go to the really slow stuff, you're still doing, these are all cycles, it's repeating things. If you go slower and slower, you get down to tidal cycles, you get a daily tidal cycle, and you get a lunar tidal cycle, and you get a seasonal cycle from the Earth going around the sun, and you get all these planets at different speeds, which, interestingly enough, you got Jupiter 12 years, Saturn 29 and so on. If you reduce all those mathematically so they fall within the same proportional octaves, sure enough, it turns out that they have many of the same relationships that fundamental musical tones have. And the big slow ones, Pluto and the big outer planets, they're painful and threatening. The real
Mm.
fast ones like Mercury and Venus and even Mars and the Moon, Sun, they're much happier. That's what we consider in astrology. So to a certain extent, uh, you know, any orbiting set of bodies will reduce themselves to basically harmonics, the same as musical harmonics. So that you find that, and they link up. They sync up like Huygens little thing. The big ones influence the smaller ones, and they link up and become, and that's how they become reflectional cycles of each other that are based on the harmonic principles, because that's how the universe is put together. So you have Mercury and Pluto are both octaves of each other, and almost an octave of the Earth. Neptune and Uranus, one's double with the orbit of the other. They're octaves of each other. Jupiter and Saturn are made to third or sixth, depending on which one you're sitting on. Jupiter, it's a sixth. Saturn gets 50 degrees further than Saturn. Jupiter is a third. But they're the same relationships you would have, and you can reduce them mathematically. They're online with the software to do it. And you can see where all the planets are, any planet is, in terms of its basic structural harmonic relationship, because that's how the universe works. The ideas of things, for instance, happening with trines in mythology, so the trines, the third or sextile.
Textiles, yeah.
They're very solid. They don't move much. They're nice because they depend on them. Whereas oppositions, in particular squares, 90 degrees apart, are unsettled, and they're not stable, and therefore they cause more activity and trouble. So in the natal chart, astrologists can make that up. When you're orbiting, when anything's orbiting you or you're orbiting something else, anything that's 60 degrees on either side of your orbit is stable. That's things, once they get there, once they start orbiting there, they stay there. And that's a solid place. When something's towards the square, it always falls out of it or goes the other way. Same with opposition. It's unstable. Those are called Lagrange points. And of course, that's how we steer satellites, and that's the kind of trajectories we use to direct our spaceships, because that's where things fall into, and it's always stable. We have a whole bunch of dust and little meteorites that are 60 degrees on either side of us. And a lot of this, there's a whole set of asteroids that are 60 degrees on either side of Jupiter. They're called Jovian asteroids because they've locked into Jupiter. And it's this mode locking that's happening all the time throughout all sets of cycles. And so that's what's happening out there. And that's what's happening at the smaller scales. Smaller scales, what's that? The hexagon's the most efficient shape. And you go down further and you get snow crystals. That's most, again, hexagon most. There's a large scale, big hexagon on the North Pole of Saturn. Nobody's quite sure why that's happening, but there's a nice hexagon right there. And it's stable. It's changed its color because Saturn changed its season over the past 4 years or so. So it's rediscovered. But the shape is still the same. So these are things that are basic patterns that are there everywhere in the environment, from the small to the large. And astrology is actually, on a good day, it's trying to connect the two in terms of how all of that affects your behavior, or how your behavior is locked into that pattern.
Correct.
So that's exciting. There's a wonderful song.
It is.
There's a wonderful song called That's About the Size of It. You get Sesame Street over there? If you do, you can certainly find it. There's a wonderful song called That's About the Size of It. And it is about pulling from the very small scale to the very large scale and showing the lyric is that's about the size. Where you put your eyes, that's about the size. So how big the big becomes a little, and that's, and so on and so forth. Great song. Very simple to listen to, and that's how finally people are teaching their kids about the universe. Look at that. You get close, you get that. So it's instead of the same thing. It's a wonderful thing.
It's a
So,
matter of, yeah, it's a matter of perspective. But before we start, we have to be mindful of the time. We still have 5 minutes. And before we went live, we had a short chat where you mentioned your mentor, Al Morrison. And I was just, I just had kind of an epiphany while you were talking. Um, Today the moon's void is in Leo right now,
mhm.
and your mentor Al Morrison would have tell us to reschedule our broadcast because it's not good to start something on a moon void. And I know that you would disagree, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I would because and he would too, because political moon is is based on electional astrology. So if you buy something, that the chart of that purchase will tell you whether, or supposedly will tell you whether that's going to be a good purchase. And of course, if the moon is passing, not making any aspects until it changes sign, it means it's kind of unstable. It's going off in one
Mm.
direction, not a solid thing. On the other hand, if what you want to do is really break the mold and do something original, then Void of Course Moon allows you to do that because it doesn't lock you into anything. It allows you to really, it's great for brand new ideas and coming up with breaking the mold. It's great for parties. It's great for just being spontaneous in general, whereas when you have a lot of aspects of sort of big field. So if you want to make a solid purchase, you want to do that. Not in of course. If you want to do an experimental purchase, say, I think I'll try that because I try all the others. I want to just try this thing off the wall. I just got a new cigarette making machine. Bought on a Void of Course Moon because the other ones just didn't work. So I'm hoping it's going to work really well because I'm sick
I'll
of the
keep
other
my
ones.
finger crossed.
Yeah, right. In fact, I just got the papers for it today on a Void of Course Moon. There they are, rolling papers.
Oh, it's cool.
And yeah, and doing this the same thing. What we're trying to do in this kind of course, it's fine for me anyway because it may not be personally for the course. It may not be making any aspects to the other planets in the current transit chart, but it may be making aspects to your chart, which means that you're getting focused going to Leo, and here I am with through Leo. So I have no problem with any of that. So I can serve my aims one way or the other. So and Alan was good about that. He understood that people with natal what it goes through some of it. I think Bill Gates and a bunch of other people who really revolutionized things often
Yeah.
had vorticos moons natally or something very late in the sign. People with stuff very late or very early in the signs, and signs tend to be outside of the usual humdrum and expectations of humanity, and they can discover things and do things that other people, it just doesn't happen to other people. And so
Exactly,
that's
that
what
other
that
people are not thinking of. Yeah, I'm born at a new moon, so I missed that Voidos moon.
So you got it's, there's just so many different things that people could learn that astrology is good at. A lot of astrologers, because they don't connect very well with science, miss it. And are missing it, but I think they're beginning to get better at it. And the same with the scientific community. They're beginning to see that some of these things that have just been off the walls turn out to be really characteristics of the physical phenomena around the world and around in behavior of humans around us. And so that's what we're doing. And behind it all, there may be a whole set of information that we only pick up on occasionally when we see a wild coincidence or when we seem to attract people with the same planets and planetary degrees. And the person to check that out from is Paul Kammerer. Is another
Yeah.
Reverend Gary Davis is my first love, and Paul Kammerer's whose birthday I share that with. It's the other person that I'm most concerned of getting the legacy out because he managed to see the world in an informational fashion, as if there's a background, a deep background of informational language that may be like kind of like binary or hex, that we don't see until it turns up. And suddenly it turns up as an algorithm in basic, or COBOL, but we don't see it happening in machine language. But it's there anyway. It's always
It
there.
is. Yeah.
And those patterns suddenly appear, to us, and we say, where'd that come from? And it was there all along, and we've been swimming in it, basically. And our world and our language and our descriptions all get influenced by this, sort of set of currents, like currents in motion, you're swirling and you don't know why. And then all these things happen, which is deep background of information that's beyond. It's really beyond, but also including the physical, and also possibly including more a largest version of looking at time. Looking at time as multidimensional, which finally people are doing mathematically, particularly the Chinese researchers. And they, you might look at, there's a couple of articles that suggest that off the top of it's, if you treat time as something it's just like a space itself.
Yeah.
Then a lot of things happen that you wouldn't ever. That explains an awful lot.
It's you're right, and I think that we should continue our series of live sessions. I know that I have more than two topics that I would like to talk to you about or talk with you about. One is your music and the connection between music and astrology, and the second one it's the topic of time and this information matrix. So let's after your visit in Vienna, or maybe during your
Yeah,
visit in Vienna,
yeah.
because for sure I will come to see you and meet you face to face.
I absolutely want
Um,
to do that. And if anyone wants to get together while I'm there, I'd be happy to lead a workshop to discuss this more. So I'm looking
it
forward to
it would be
lots more.
great. So, John, this has been exactly the conversation I was hoping for. Top down from systems and not button up from the symbols. I really enjoyed it. For the audience, please remember that John is in Vienna between 7 and 8 of August. You can find him at Café Henriette. I will leave all the details also in the comments. The recording of the session will stay both on LinkedIn and on Facebook. So you can come to see the details. John's website is astrococktail.com, and there you can find also a lot of very insightful articles that he wrote. So thank you very much one more time, John. Thank you to the audience for being here with us today, and I wish you a nice evening.
Delighted.